Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Fractured Sky, which is brought to you by IV Studio. It's for 1 to 5 players, ages 14 up, and games generally run about 40 to 90 minutes. A star tore to pieces and fell to the sea. 10 cursed islands arose from the depths. A Newman was awakened by the clamor they caused, whose anger turned the waters pitch black. The god beast called out to the seers and the wise men of earth and did offer to grant them one wish. In exchange, they would bring him star fragments that fell, so he might cast them back to the heavens. But only one wish would be granted to them, to the ones who had gathered the most. They took to the sky in their vessels. They soared for riches, for love, for glory. Fractured Sky is a game of deduction, sneaky strategy, and resource management set on a fantastical island. You will lead your kingdom in the hunt for shards of fractured falling stars, which are rumored to grant wishes to those that can amass enough of them. Using airships, players send their armies to regions with the star shards, but finding those is not always easy, and hiring seers to predict can be worth the investment. Over time, you will increase your presence on the island, placing permanent buildings to give you advantages like extra resources or increasing the size of your troop numbers. So go forth, brave adventurer, and claim your heart's greatest wish. However, only one wish will be granted, so who of you will amass the most shards before the final star falls? So this game is all about StarFalls. You need the most in order to win. Now, you're going to have a public card that everyone will know where one of those shards is located out in the island. The island is made up of different regions where you can get resources, but also there are hexes that are connected to those different regions. These are floating platforms where you can build a fortress that can help you out, or even a market to give you more access to the different types of resources that are available. Some of these floating platforms are more valuable than others because some connect to only 2 regions, others are 3, and some are 4. Obviously, the ones that are connected to 4 different regions are going to be highly sought after, and you're going to have to try to get in there before the other players. So, how do you get more StarFalls if you only see one available out on the board? And that can change up through the course of the game. Depending on how the previous round went, there might still be StarFalls available and visible out on the main board. Now, the thing here is that you'll have at least one that you know where it is, but in order to discover where the others are, you'll see that there's a series of blue cards. Depending on what round you're in will determine how many of these are out there. And these are all hidden locations for those StarFalls. So you can scout that by paying 2 gold and looking at one of those cards. And then once you do, you can just place your cube above it, or you can choose to take a resource, which is very valuable to do because resources are highly needed in this game to do various things. We'll get to that in a sec, but there's also objective cards, and you can choose to peek at those by spending any combination of 2 resources that you so choose. So you can just take a look at those again, keeping it private and determining if maybe you can win that starfall for that objective. So that's really the key, is finding the starfalls that are visible, finding the ones that are hidden, and also fulfilling the objectives in that particular round. So those card actions are really one of 3 different types of actions that you're going to be tapping into. And really what I would call your main action is placing one of your airships into a region. Now the thing is that you're going to be attaching troop power to your airship. And you can ever only have a maximum of 10 troops out into the island during a particular round. And if you go over that number, if you go over 10, you're going to start to pay penalties. So you have to be very mindful about what troops you put with what airships. Because the reason you're doing that is trying to win rewards in a region. You know, it could be StarFalls, it could be just simply be the resources of that region you're trying to gather, because you'll need resources to look at cards and build buildings. So it's very important to win in the regions that you're after. And there's a way to augment that as well, which we'll get to, but perhaps based on information that you've learned from cards will determine where you're going to be placing your airships in this particular round. And then once you've placed your last and final 3rd airship, then your turn is basically over. And then you'll be able to move your player marker, your player turn marker, to a spot in the next row. And it's up to you where you place it, but it's very important to note that wherever you are in that turn order will determine what happens in a tie. So if you're in a region where you're battling it out and it's 5 on 5 and you're way down in the player turn order, well, then you're not going to win that particular region. The other player will. So it's just an interesting mix, and I learned the hard way, absolutely learned the hard way, to be very mindful of that player turn order. Also, you do have the ability to bluff about troop power. You know, it is a secret how much power you put out there, but the 1 chip and the 10 chip have white edges around them. So folks know that you're like, oh wow, did they go all in or are they just bluffing? I have to go find out. So they'll move their ships into that region and then battle it out at the end of the round. So it is an interesting twist for sure. And you had to figure out, you know, if it's worth calling their bluff or is it not. Now, the other actions that are available to you are buildings. And like I said before, you have these floating platforms. If you put a market out in a region that connects to regions where you've put your airships, then you'll get extra resources from those markets. And fortresses, if they connect to the different regions where you put your airships, they'll give you a bonus in the amount of power or troop power that's out in the world. Now, you don't have to be mindful of the fortress power when you're calculating your number of 10 troops that you're putting out there. That's strictly for the airships. So it does give you ways to augment and add more power to certain regions. The other thing you might build is a temporary one. It is called a skimmer. It is a ship that just adds a +1 power to a particular region where perhaps maybe you have one of your airships. And you do this hopefully to bump yourself over your opponents in the battle. So those are temporary builds and will go away at the end of the round. Now, all those builds, the market, the fortress, and the skimmer, are going to cost you in resources. So you'll have to have enough resources in order to pay for them to put them out into the world. And again, you can do this on your turn. As long as you haven't placed your 3rd airship, you can keep adding these things and you have the resources to pay for it. So the market's going to cost 2 wood, and the fortress is going to cost you 3 iron, and finally the skimmer is going to cost you a wood and an iron. So you have to be mindful of all your different resources on the track. And again, another reason you're going into regions trying to get resources and gain different types of markets and these floating areas, because again, some of those connect to 4 different regions, so potentially giving you more and more resources as you have airships in those particular regions and battling it out and trying to win the most StarFalls in the long run. And it's important to note that the fortresses and the markets all stack along with the skimmers. If you put multiple skimmers in a location, they're going to stack as well. So it does give you even more strategic power through the course of the game to have those in play for sure. Now, at the end of the round, you're just going to reveal all your troop power and collect rewards. If you're first in a region with a starfall, that's going to be your reward. But if there are no starfalls, then it will go to the resources. You'll get the resources there. This person that's in second place will get to choose resources as well, but not as many, and so forth and so on. So the interesting thing though is how that it gets augmented by markets you have attached and by fortresses that you have attached, how those battles go. And it really is this back and forth. Again, you're trying to get the most starfalls in order to be the one that gets the wish at the end of the game. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, the game might look like there's just a ton of things going on, but really, it's quite straightforward, very accessible, and easy to engage with. I got my family to join in and play, but I did play with Ivy Studio, where I made that crucial mistake of not paying attention to the turn order. Ties happen in this game way more than I thought they would, so that's a really key thing to keep your eye on as you're positioning yourself from finishing out the airships and then placing your marker in the next turn order. So along with that though, it does come down to resources, because the more resources, the more you can do on your turn. The less resources, then you're just going to be focused on placing your airships, trying to get more resources or those starfalls. And the marketplaces and fortresses add so much to the game. They give you so much more ability to have more forces and get more resources from the different regions. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.